Well, good thing I already had this video recorded, because what is this? So I was working on the script for my M7 Archer guide, which will be the next one of those guide videos that comes out, by the way. And basically, I started talking about term enchants in the gear section. Now, everyone knows Soul Eater absolutely clowns on Duplex for clear, but after arching with only Soul Eater for almost half a year, I now argue that Duplex is comically overrated, and it's incredibly easy to arch with only Soul Eater. And that even if you are Archer and only have one term, using Soul Eater to speed up your clear is way more efficient than using Duplex to speed up your bosses. However, I wanted the numbers to back myself up, so I did what I should have done a long time ago, which was to do the math. Now, for those who don't know, I was the person who popularized the Duplex term. The video on my channel about it is what caused Duplex to increase in price 4 times over. I actually wasn't the person who came up with it though. In fact, idrk came up with it on like day 1 or day 2 of the Nether update when one of us dropped it and he said it looked like it would be good on term. Now, he probably wasn't the first person to think this, but he's where I first heard the idea from, so he's who I generally credit with the idea. Now, a few months and a few handles later, and I put it on a term and then told the entire world about it, and now everyone has it. But what I failed to do in this video was use it for more than 5 hours before talking about it. Typically, I like to use stuff for an extended period of time before making a video on it, like I did with the Sub-Zero Wisp. This video will amend this mistake by taking an in-depth look at the mathematics behind Duplex for Soul Eater for Archer class M7, as it's like not that useful outside of M7 if I'm being honest. However, other classes will be talked about at the end of the video, so make sure to subscribe and let's get right into it. To start off, this was all tested and calculated at Archer 50 with Hypermax gear and Duplex 5 term. Flat DPS was calculated in 2 scenarios, one with a decoy for bouncy arrows like you might see for Storm, Gold War, Necron, or Purple Dragon and M7, and one without a decoy like you would see for Max or the other 4 dragons or any mob outside of M7, because if you decoy outside of M7 you either have a serious DPS issue or the decoy isn't really helping that much. Actually, it helps a little bit on M3, but that's like it. Anyways, let's start by examining the difference in DPS to a mob when the Archer passive or bouncy arrows is not able to proc. This is like if you're shooting a dragon in M7, right? We're gonna start by learning a few things about the Archer class. At Arch 50 you have a 101% chance to shoot a second arrow. If there's no dupe Archer in the dungeon run, this gets increased to a 151% chance. The extra 51% chance is actually a chance to shoot a triple arrow. I tested this, and in 24 out of 50 trials, I shot 3 arrows with a Juju, whereas for 26 trials, I shot 2. These results are very close to the theoretical 51% chance of a triple arrow, so they basically prove the fact that chances over 100 turn into a triple arrow chance. The rest of this video will assume you don't have dupe Archer because duping Archer just makes no sense. This means that mathematically, you'll shoot 3 arrows from your term plus an extra 1.51 arrows from Archer passive every time you shoot, on average. Of course, you can't actually shoot half an arrow, but over time, the number of arrows you shoot will average out to be 1.51 per shot, so we use this number when doing the math. This means every shot will do, on average, 4.51 arrows worth of damage if all of the arrows hit. And remember, we're sort of calculating as if you're shooting like a dragon or shooting a wither, but for some reason there isn't a decoy there, so we're going to assume all the arrows are hitting. You will notice I measure everything in arrows worth of damage because it's a convenient way to measure damage such that it will be the same value at the end, no matter how much damage you do versus how much damage I do. Duplex 5 shoots an extra arrow doing 20% the damage of a normal arrow. I tested, this 20% is not bugged, it works as intended. This is 0.2 arrows worth of damage, bringing our total to 4.71 arrows per shot. However, Flame also does damage, but it does damage in time intervals of 1 second. So we need to change from arrows worth of damage in 1 shot to arrows worth of damage in 1 second. In 1 second, you can shoot 5 times with 100% attack speed, which you should all have by the way. So this brings our total to 23.55 arrows worth of damage per second from Duplex. However, the total number of arrows being shot is actually 27.55, since Duplex arrows don't do a full arrow's worth of damage, which is going to be important in a second. But for now, back to Flame. Flame 2 does 6% of a single arrow's damage per second for 4 seconds before it wears off and you need to proc it again. Duplex 5 buffs all fire ticks on an enemy to do 1.5 times their normal damage. I tested, this 1.5 times damage is not bugged, it works as intended. I also tested Flame without this buff, and it still works as intended. This means that with Duplex, you will do 9% of an arrow's worth of damage per second with Flame, bringing our total DPS to 23.64 arrows worth of damage. Finally, Term has a beam ability that's been glitched since release to not have a cooldown at all. So every 3 hits, you'll hit your term beam for an extra arrow's worth of damage. Since you shoot a total of 27.55 arrows, you will have 9.18333 repeating arrows worth of damage per second from term beam, bringing our total damage to 32.82333 repeating arrows worth of damage per second from a Duplex 5 term that is not proccing bouncy arrows. Now, how about Soul Eater? For the sake of testing, we will ignore the actual Soul Eater enchant and test flat DPS against something like a drag, because the purpose of this test is to decide whether it's worth sacrificing clear speed in favor of boss speed by having Duplex duplex on your turn if you only have one turn. Moving on. You'll still shoot 22.55 arrows per second. However, this time there's no additional duplex arrows shot. Flame only does 6% of an arrow's worth of damage, bringing our total to 22.61 arrows worth of damage per second. There will only be 7.51666 repeating arrows worth of damage from turn beam, since there are 5 less arrows to proc beam. This totals to 30.12666 repeating arrows worth of damage per second without duplex. This means that duplex 5 does 8.951% more DPS than Soul Eater if there's no decoy present to proc bouncy arrows. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this is definitely not worth killing your speed for. 9% damage is not a lot when you're sacrificing a lot of time on clear for it, even if you only play Archer. However, you may think this 9% is wrong because on Necron, Storm, Goldor, or anything with a decoy, it feels way more than 9% more DPS than Soul Eater. This is due to the first glitch of the day. Duplex is broken. Some careful frame-by-frame analysis of some past runs I arched in with a duplex term reveal that duplex arrows actually do the same damage as a normal arrow after bouncing off of something. So basically, if you have a decoy, your duplex arrow will do 20% of a normal arrow on its first hit, bounce off the decoy, and then for every other hit will do the same damage as a normal arrow. But how many times do arrows bounce? Believe it or not, I could not find a source to answer this question for the Archer passive, so I did some investigation. Basically, I went into a solo M2, killed all the mobs, put a decoy next to Scarf, and ice sprayed him since Scarf doesn't take knockback like a Wither wouldn't take knockback, so it was a pretty fair test. I then shot once with a clean Juju and counted the number of damage ticks that weren't due to ferocity. This required frame-by-frame analysis of a video I recorded of myself doing all this. I'll put my data on the screen now, but we'll summarize the important aspects real quick. All my data values were between 8 and 12 inclusive and averaged at around 10. This is actually somewhat odd data if you really think about it, but it doesn't matter for our purposes. We only care about the average. With my clean Juju, I'm shooting 2 arrows half the time and 3 arrows half the time due to Archer passive having a 1.51% chance to shoot a second arrow. Our average hits per shot of 10 divided by our average arrows per shot of 2.5 gives us an average 4 arrow hits per individual arrow. If anyone has more information or does further testing on how the Arch passive works, I'm extremely interested, so please let me know in the comments or Discord DMs. Anyways, on average, it took a full second for a single shot to stop bouncing, meaning that over a second's worth of time, 4 times the amount of arrows calculated earlier will hit the target. Now, this number is only true if you've been shooting at the mob for a full second already, because that's the amount of time it requires to ramp up to max DPS according to my testing. In this scenario, 90.2 arrows will hit from the non-duplex term per second, and 100.2 arrows will hit from the duplex term. However, 5 of the arrows from the duplex term are duplex arrows, since you shoot 5 times per second, and while after bouncing they do normal arrow damage, they will still only do 20% of a normal arrow on their first hit. This means that over these 5 arrows, we're only doing 1 arrow worth of damage, so duplex damage per second goes down to 106.2 arrows worth of damage. If we factor in turn beam, we get that the non-duplex term will do 120.2666 repeating arrows worth of damage, whereas the duplex term does 142.9333 repeating arrows worth of damage. Factoring in flame, we get 120.32666 repeating arrows worth of damage and 143.02333 repeating arrows worth of damage from the non-duplex and duplex terms respectively. This means that with a decoy for bouncy arrows, duplex does 18.863% more DPS than Soul Eater would. Now, is this worth screwing your clear speed for? No, definitely not, especially seeing as that will save you about 5 seconds max over the course of a run, while losing definitely a lot more than 5 seconds on clear. However, it is still extremely good DPS, and I would recommend going for duplex at some point. Duplex is not useless. I should also point out that because servers will never run at 20 TPS, you won't actually get 5 shots every single second, but because that's just a basic scale factor, the actual percent differences in damage will remain the same. Now, it doesn't take a genius to realize that the majority of DPS duplex adds is due to glitched bouncy arrows or turn beam. So I wondered how much the level of the duplex enchant you have actually matters. So I went through and calculated damage per second for all levels of duplex and graphed them against each other. Can you see the difference? I can't. If we kick out the Soul Eater and graph it on a much smaller interval, you can see the difference between duplex 1 and 5 is literally 0.824 arrows worth of damage per second. And that's just duplex 1. It gets even worse at duplex 3, which is still much more affordable than duplex 5. If there is no decoy for bouncy arrows, duplex 5 will do 2.575% more damage per second than duplex 1 will. And with a decoy, duplex 5 only does 0.579% more damage than duplex 1. You heard that right. On the only areas where duplex is actually sort of worth it, like on Necron or on Storm, a 300 million coin enchant does 0.5% more damage than a 17 million coin version of the same enchant. Think of it like this. Assuming you do 6.3 million damage exactly per shot to Necron, going from duplex 1 to duplex 5 is basically like increasing the 6.3 million damage to 6.336 million damage. That's not worth it. That's actually close to rounding error levels of DPS. Looking at this graph of price versus DPS, you can see that as you get to higher levels of the enchant, the cost effectiveness drops off exponentially. Now, I wouldn't recommend actually using Duplex 1 as you'll probably just be seen as poor and get kicked, and it is noticeably worse for drag skip, even if upgrading other stuff will usually be more worth it. In my M7 Arch guide, I will do an in-depth analysis of cost effectiveness of multiple high-level upgrades, such as some final talisman, duplex term, and dominance levels. This will be addressed in greater detail later. The main takeaway from this video is that not only is it not worth to have duplex if you only have one term, and that you can also arch pretty fine with just Soul Eater, but also that Duplex 1 is going to be extremely similar to Duplex 5, so you don't need to fully max out Duplex to get reasonable DPS. I would recommend for a good budget term, you should run Duplex 3. Now, what about someone who's not Arch 50, or someone who's not even Archer? Well, if you're not Arch 50, you will shoot less total arrows on average, so Duplex will be a greater amount better than Soul Eater if there is no decoy, but if there is a decoy, the lower chance for arrows to bounce makes it actually a smaller difference in damage between Duplex and Soul Eater than if you are Archer 50. The only class other than Archer that should ever actually need Duplex is Burrs, and Duplex is actually much better for Burrs than it is for Arch in a lot of cases for a few reasons. First of all, Burrs doesn't shoot 1.51 extra arrows, so the extra arrow will be a larger portion of DPS. Furthermore, the extra arrow will help stack Bloodlust faster, making DPS much better. However, bouncy arrows only have a 50% chance of bouncing, reduced by 15% every bounce, which makes the gap not as large as it is with Archer if there's a decoy to proc bouncy arrows with. Finally, I personally find doing minis with Soul Eater faster than Duplex for Archer, because the extra damage from the soul absolutely destroys the tiny damage buff from Duplex on clear. I also don't think it's worth using Duplex on minis as any other class, because they don't die much faster unless you're Burrs, and Burrs already kills minis fast enough to not warrant the loss of a hotbar slot. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more in-depth content like this. I have a few videos planned coming up, but until then, I'll see you all around. Peace out.